Hi, and I'm back. Yes, indeed. It is Frankie Flowers here on a Wednesday evening in Southern Ontario on a night where we have temperatures that are still quite summer-like, even though that summer is ending this Sunday, September the 22nd. That means we get into the talk of fall gardening. For those that don't know who I am, I'm Frank Ferragini, aka Frankie Flowers. You can see me Monday through Friday on City TV's Breakfast Television. I'm a four-time best-selling garden author. My family own and operate two garden centers in their greenhouse growers. They're called Bradford Greenhouses Garden Gallery, located one just north of Toronto, and of course, Bradford, Ontario, the other in Barrie, Ontario. I have a lifetime of garden expertise. I've worked in a garden center most of my life. I've built and designed several gardens, including I've been an award-winning landscape designer, won some awards at Canada Blooms before as well. So I'm here, and I'm here, and I'm here to help. For those that are wondering, hey, where the heck has Frankie been? Over the last few weeks, it's been exceptionally busy. I moved my one son to London, Ontario, to Fanshawe, where he's starting off on a new journey in the world, where these are the glory days, is what Bruce Springsteen would say. Had another son that went off to grade 10, and that son, my youngest, of course, is continuing his training for freestyle skiing. So I was in Quebec. And this coming Friday, along with BT, I will be heading to Disney World. So Monday and Tuesday of next week, you will see me live in Disney World. And that's why I will be back on Wednesday, and I'll be back here on Wednesday for you as well. Just want to give a shout out to one of the longtime persons and viewers that pop on here and supporters that is an active gardener, is Paula Polly. So happy to join you tonight as well. Matthew Amos, another good friend of mine. He's got big news as well. Just got somebody calling me here, but I'm just going to do this and do that and say, can't talk right now. Can I call you later? So just lots going on. I'm just going to pop you back up. Where did you go? Okay, so he says he has big news to tell you this week. I'm going to Hamilton Comic-Con in Hamilton, my sister and her husband. I'll let you know what autographs I get. Hamilton Comic-Con this year, and I have a lineup. Of course, Hamilton Comic-Con is a great one. And Matthew's the king of getting autographs. But we're here tonight to talk to you a little bit about gardening. So what I'm going to start off with this evening is on my Facebook page, I put a little shout out saying I would be here this evening. And I also asked some questions out there as well. And some of those questions, I wanted to get to those this evening. So we're going to do a few of those, and then hopefully that'll present some other questions that you have as well. So we're just going to share the screen for you. I'm going to hit present here on my Canva. If you don't know, Canva's lots of fun. So there we go. You have questions. I'm here to help you get growing. So let's see some of the questions that some asked. So this is from Diana. How can I get my orchid to bloom? This is what it looks like right now. And that is a picture of Diana's orchid. And if we take a look at that orchid, we can see just to the bottom of that center stem, you can actually see that there's a little bit of a bump that's there. And that there will be a stem that's going to shoot its way out and should be somewhere that's going to stimulate and shoot at some blooms. The only thing that I have a grave concern with your orchid is we can see it looks deep green and healthy. In order for an orchid to bloom, it doesn't need as much nutrients as what you would think. And indeed, we need to cut back on the watering. And we also almost need that foliage to turn a little bit more yellow. So my recommendation for you is cut back on the watering, let it dry out a few times, and then just water and do not fertilize. And that should stimulate the growth of a floral spike, to come out. And with that, you'll get a cluster of flowers that come. I'm pleased to say that my orchid in my house has just rebloomed, and I'm super happy with that. So it's not easy. I'm going to tell you, it's not easy, but it is indeed possible. This is from Kathleen Donald. Please talk about plants you can trim and what to leave for spring. For example, should I cut down my Annabella hydrangea? I'm going to leave the pink and blue ones for spring because I can remember cutting them back in fall one year and got luscious foliage but no flowers. So I've got a couple pictures there. The one flower that you can see, the first one there at the top left, is a lilac. And of course, lilacs, we do not want to prune those in fall whatsoever because the common lilacs, the French lilacs, actually their flower buds will already be there. So those we only prune, that is, after they flower. The next picture to your right is a pink hydrangea. They can be pink, they can be blue, they can be purple, all due to the acidity in the soil. And they're a large leaf hydrangea, also known as a macrophylla, and those too bloom on this year's growth. So the only thing we would really remove on those is some of the flower heads after they start to dry out. But really what you want to do is leave those. And then in spring, what we'll do is we'll cut back any dead wood. And that's pretty much it. The only other thing that we would prune at this time of year is if we had one branch end or stem that maybe with heavy wet snow would break. So we just prune it just to keep it a little bit tighter. But overall, we do not want to prune because we're going to remove the flowers if we prune it this time of year. On the bottom there could be a limelights. It could actually be anything from PG hydrangeas, similar to Annabelle. They bloom on new wood, and we can see the size of the flower heads and the amount of flower heads that are there. In fall, late fall, after we have several frosts, I like to prune them back by about a third at that time. The reason being is I'm going to remove those flower heads off. Those flower heads are snow catchers, and with that, they can bend and break underneath a heavy, early wet snow. So I prune them back by a third, and then in spring, what I do is I can prune them back to almost 18 inches above ground level if they're not a standard and or tree form, or what I can do is just leave them at that third that I pruned and remove any dead wood. So a reminder once again, lilacs, macrophylla hydrangea, which is large leaf hydrangea, do not touch them. And any other plant that you have in your garden that's early spring blooming, like forsythia, do not prune those as well. Now, we got another question out there as well. This is from Bob and Sandra Montgomery. Rose beetles. My 9-year-old mom said, ask Frankie about rose beetles. She's spraying with dish soap and water on them. Any suggestions? Thanks, Frankie. You're awesome. I didn't put that in there. She actually said that it was awesome. So dish soap and water is an insecticidal soap. And the only difficulty when you're applying that with a beetle is a hard shell insect. And it doesn't really penetrate into that hard shell. So it's really ineffective when we're doing a spray on beetles. A couple things with beetles is we can pick them and remove them and just put them in soapy water. So they almost drown them in soapy water. That will work. Picking them on a cool morning is when they're dormant, because actually on cooler mornings, they're kind of stunned. We can actually even shake the plant into a little bit of a bed sheet and you'll see them all fall off. We can use pheromone traps, and a pheromone trap, we would locate it far away from the rose, and that would attract those beetles away from your rose bush, and it would trap them. And then the other thing that we want to do, and we still have time to do, is to control some of the beetle populations by controlling grubs. Grub is the larvae stage of a beetle, and by applying Grub Be Gone while the soil temperatures are still warm, so we can still do that this time of year, we can reduce grub populations. So once again, when it comes to beetles, we can remove them, hand removal, and we're bagging them and throwing them out, or drowning them in soapy water. We can use a pheromone trap, and then we can control by trying to get them to be eliminated by reducing the amount of grubs, by applying a grub control like a nematode or Grub Be Gone. Next question that we have is from Patty Wortman. Oh, yeah, this is the time of year when it starts to get chillier outdoors at night, and things like ladybugs and mice and rats will try to get indoors. We heard lavender with water sprayed around the house will keep mice from entering. Lavender oil is hard to find and expensive. Is there anything else these rodents do not like? Well, with lavender oil, you can actually get some dried lavender, and you can just take it and put it into and immerse it into olive oil. And that can create your own lavender oil if you wanted to do that. It would infuse over time. But really, when it comes to mice and it comes to rats, the one thing they don't like the smell of is mint. So a lot of the times when people will actually pack up their cottage for the winter, is they'll actually put mint, dried mint, into some of their different drawers in their kitchen, and this will repel mice. So a mint spray, a minty spray, is one that would work better than a lavender spray out there. But the other thing that we want to do is make sure that we take a look at the exterior of our home for cracks and crevices. If we have some cracks, we can put steel wool in. We can recaulk our windows. Any areas where a mouse or rat could get in is what we want to try to do. And then you can put bait boxes. Tomcat has bait boxes on the exterior of your home, so you prevent them from coming indoors by taking control of the problem outdoors. So we have another question here from Lori and Jim Smith. We have 2 fig trees. The pic shows what is on them now. Do they change color when they are ripe? So when they're ripe, and those guys there are not ripe, you'll actually start to see the bottom of the fig almost split. So you can see how they're a deep green and they're hard. They'll actually almost look like they're swollen and almost about to crack. you'll see that the outer kind of casing around them, which is the outer coating on them, I'm using the word, will become soft. And when you touch them, they'll actually be a little bit soft. And then that is when they're ripe and ready to eat. Those guys there still look like the one that's out of focus there looks like it could probably be ready in about 7 days. The other ones still look like they're 10 days away. Once again, a reminder, fig trees are marginally hardy, and so they will not overwinter outdoors without any protection. Sometimes you actually even have to dig a hole and bury them into a hole to help them, or bringing them indoors into an area that still gets dormancy though. So placing them in a fruit cellar is something that works out for those guys. So there's a little bit of tips from there too. And this is from Jacqueline Belfier, Houston. Lake Cavis, I have no idea what I'm doing. Help. So the first thing is we want to figure out, okay, and when we're thinking about landscape, we're thinking about, okay, what do and how do we want to use the property? So are we thinking about in the future putting a pool in? Of course, with that backsliding door, we want to build a deck off the back of the home that's there. We want to make sure that we're not blocking any windows. We then also want to use plant material to soften the home, but we also want to use plant material to create some privacy from the neighbors that are there. We would also need to know which way that house faces. If it faces east and or north, more it would be having morning sun in the back, the backside of the house that we're looking at. So there's many different things that we can do. The one thing that I'm going to recommend for you is always in your landscape, incorporate some upright evergreens. And the reason for that is in the wintertime, you'll still have some green outdoors. But there's so many different things. So I have more questions for you. And by asking the questions and filling out the questions, we'll be able to figure out what you would like in your design. And then it's also like, I love hydrangeas, plants that you don't like. Those are all different things that we can do. But the first thing that I would really want you to do is really you want to utilize the backyard. And that would be by having access through that backsliding door, by building a little bit of a deck on the back. And I would build not a little bit of a deck, I would build a larger deck on the back of the house because it looks like it's quite big. That's where you could also put a dining table. You could put your barbecue out there. If you wanted to make it really large, you could put a few lounge chairs, but there's a lot of things that we can do with that. So that's just some of the questions that we had in terms of, and there were several, and I'll try to get there and answer those questions as well. So we got a couple of different questions that are here coming in fast and furious, and we're going to go to those right now. I'm just going to scroll up here for a little bit. We got Tina. Hi, Tina. How are you? Can I transplant Shasta Daisy and Black-Eyed Susans in the fall? Also, is cutting back shrubs okay? Transplanting in the fall is an excellent time to do so. Shasta Daisy is super easy. You can actually do not only transplant them, you can divide them if they're larger. Black-Eyed Susans, super easy as well. You can be transplanting those. Black-Eyed Susans sometimes are a little bit of a big plant because they've been in bloom. So you may want to just leave them flowering. Shasta Daisies are done their flowering. Maybe wait till after the Black-Eyed Susans are done their flowering and you can do that. But if you only have time now, do it now. And it's also cutting back shrubs okay. So with many of the evergreen shrubs, we would be looking at any of our shrubs, evergreen and even flowering shrubs, and we're really doing pruning to prevent winter damage. So heavy wet snow, freezing rain, getting on them and bending them over and breaking them. I don't want to do any significant pruning on evergreens at this time of the year because what we could do is actually, if we got a really cold snap, we could be burning them. Any things that have been finished their flower that have like even late summer flowering shrubs, like even like Rose of Sharon, we can be pruning right now. I'd be fine with pruning some of the spreading junipers that you have out there. But I would avoid right now, I would avoid pruning things like boxwood hedges and or pyramidal cedars at this time. We got Jerry Lynn giving a shout out from Stainer. Hey, Stainer, how you doing? As well, beautiful little place there. I went there not too long ago with my dad and my son. We stopped into a place that actually was fried chicken and ramen. Fried chicken, my boy had and my dad had, and I had the ramen. It was actually really good. I forget the name of it, but sure, it's around the main street. Sherry Rose, good evening, Frankie. When I plant my tulip bulbs, do I put hen manure to keep squirrels from eating them in with bulb or on top of the soil? So first off, tulip bulbs we can purchase right now. They are just arriving in garden centers and home improvement stores. We do not want to plant them right now. So if you purchase them right now to keep them nice and viable and fresh, We want to put them in a cool, dark space that's dry. And then what we're going to wait to do is in almost mid-October and even later in October, because we really want to be planting them just before we start to get into ground frost. We're going to be planting the height of that tulip bulb 3 times in depth. We're going to, after planting the tulip bulbs, we're going to clean up the area where we planted, and then you put the hen manure on top of the soil as a repellent because the squirrels don't like it. It will actually be a natural fertilizer that's calcium enriched. That will also help out. The key is to clean up after planting so that we don't have shells of tulips sitting all over the place, because then the squirrels will come and go, hey, there was tulips here. And after a few rains, the hen manure won't be as effective. Another thing you can do if you have an extreme squirrel problem is after you plant them, just underneath the layer of soil, is put some chicken wire on top and then put soil on top of that. When the squirrels go to dig down, they can't get any further because the chicken wire, but the tulips can grow through the chicken wire. So that's another thing that we can do as well. Question is, can I trim a Rose of Sharon right now? Absolutely. Rose of Sharon related to the hibiscus family, late summer blooming, that can be pruned now with no fear whatsoever. As a general rule of thumb, we don't want to be pruning no more than a third. It has been fairly hot and will continue to be hot up until the weekend. So I'd be pruning on the weekend when we get into a little bit of cooler temperatures. Things are dry. Just before this, I was out there watering my backyard, and plant material is super dry right now, containers as well. And fall watering is super key because we want our plants to go into winter not under stress. So if we left them too dry, they would go into winter under stress, and that would cause a problem as well. Shout out to Windsor, Ontario. Hey, Windsor. Hi, Michelle. I hope you're having a wonderful evening as well. Paula Polly, my good friend, has a question. Can you please tell me the best way to preserve our dahlias, cannas, and begonia during the winter? I'm hoping my cold cellar will be the ideal spot. It will. It will. Your cold cellar is dry. It's also a spot that is cool, and dark. That's cool. So what we want to do is when we lift those, so we're going to wait for a few frosts because right now it's warm. It's been summer-like. We're enjoying them. They're blooming. The cannas look great. The dahlias look fantastic. So we're going to enjoy them. After a couple of frosts, what we're going to do is we're going to lift those roots. We're going to cut off all the foliage that's there. We're going to leave the roots and tubers, and even if you had gladioli, you'd have corms. We're going to put them outdoors and allow that soil to all dry off of them. Then we're just going to take a brush, so even a paintbrush, we're going to try to get as much soil off of them. And then what we're going to do is if we had some boxes, and let's say that we had dry sawdust or even shredded newspaper, we're going to store them in that and separate them so that they're not touching each other. And then even if you were, even if you had some of those produce boxes or even like a milk crate, something like that, but you could also do it in a shoe box as well. You're going to store them in that cold cellar. And then during the winter months, we're going to check them on occasion to make sure that one of them didn't rot and that's going to go over to the other ones. We can dust them with a little bit of sulfur. So you can get copper sulfate at your garden center, sulfur, and that can actually help as well. But that's generally the rule of thumb for overwintering those guys. So there you go. Sue Elliott. Hi, Sue. Replying to Paula. Also, what if you don't have a cold cellar? The basement is not really cool. So we really just want to put them in a dark, dry space. That's the key. But if it's cool, it's much better. So a dark, dry space is what you would want. That's insulated. One that's not going to go like your garage will freeze. So it has to be, if your garage is insulated and the temperature in the garage doesn't go below freezing, you just put it in the darkest corner of your garage and that could work as well. We got Tracy Reynolds, which is saying, welcome back, FF. Hope you had an amazing summer. Missed your Facebook Lives. Thank you. It's great to be back, Tracy, and I hope things are going well at your flower shop as well. How about boomerang lilacs? So boomerang lilacs are ones that will bloom multiple times. Those are the varieties that you could prune right now. And I would only do a light pruning on those. I would wait till they bloom in spring again and then prune after they flower in spring so that you could promote that second and third bloom at that time. Matthew is asking a question about BT, where Sid is on this time. Sid will be back. He's just been sick. So he is actually flying out with us Friday as well to Disney. So he will be back. Lori Smith, hello, Frank. I have a butterfly bush in pots that I'm going to plant in a flower bed. Should I trim them back? Butterfly bushes, what I would do is plant them before, so just go ahead and plant them right now. Use a quick stir fertilizer. That will actually reduce the amount of shock. After we have a few frosts, that's when we cut them back because they're going to the butterfly bush next spring. Be aware of this. They're very late to actually sprout, and they actually mostly will sprout from the bottom. So sometimes you'll be like, oh, everything else is growing. My butterfly bush, there's nothing going on. Look to almost at the bottom of the soil line, you'll see a little bit of green, and they'll sprout from there, and they'll grow up to 6 to 8 feet within a season. So they're very late. So that's some tips for you there. Miriam. Hi, Miriam. Good evening, Frankie. How are you? I'm doing great. What should I do to prevent the bees not to bite my red apples? This year we got a good amount of apples on the trees, but most of them are being bitten by bugs or beetles. Please help. And then what are the other a little bit there? I'm just going to say, please help. I will be here with you until 7:22. It's still, what do we got here? I think we're still good for time. So a lot of the times the bites that we're having on the apples, we can actually cover them. So if you go on and you look at apple covers, so you can actually cover the apple while it's maturing. Picking the apple before it's fully ripened is also another thing that you can do and allow it to ripen indoors. Right now, what's happening is it's not probably bees that are biting into the apple. It would be things like yellow jackets or even the bald-faced wasps. And they're really only going after the real ripe ones because they're attracted to the fermentation of the ethylene. So, but you can get apple covers and fruit covers that will actually help you out with that as well. Tracy Reynolds is giving us a little bit of a tip as well. Dried lavender doesn't work very well. I had a mouse problem this summer in my flower studio. There you go. But once again, they don't like the smell of mint. They really do not like the smell of mint that's out there. Betty Aquino. Hi, Frankie. When do I remove the bulbs of my Canna indica? And where can they be stored? If you just go up, and maybe you've already seen, I just went through the whole tips about getting those tubers out. And we're waiting for a few frosts just for a little bit of dieback. We're then removing them, allowing them to dry so that we get the soil to dry on them outdoors on a nice sunny dry day. Dust the soil off, cut off all the green, and you're going to store them indoors in a cool, dry spot if you can. Got another question here from Hema. Hello, Frankie. Can you talk about repotting hibiscus? I repotted mine and it died. Thank you, Hema. So hibiscus, first thing is when we're repotting, if it's in a 10-inch pot, we don't want to jump all the way up to a bigger pot, like a 16-inch pot. If it's in a 10-inch, we go 12, at most 14 inches. If we go to too big of a pot size, the plant will actually drown out. Secondly, we want to make sure that when we're repotting, we're using a potting soil. Super important because that potting soil has the ability to absorb moisture but dry out. Thirdly, we want to make sure that the container that we're repotting in has drainage, meaning holes in the bottom or somewhere where water can sit in the plant will not sit in water. So sometimes even stone in the base of the pot. No drainage, too much water, root rot, the plant will die. Best time to be repotting a hibiscus, if it's really pot bound, you can do it at this time, but the best time to be repotting a hibiscus would be in spring when we go to put them outdoors. If you're bringing your hibiscus in at this time of the year because of the risk of frost, more so towards the end of this month, make sure you spray with something like Bug Be Gone as an insecticidal soap so that we're not bringing any insects in. So I hope that happened. Most likely the reason why your hibiscus died was your container, maybe it was the wrong soil, container maybe didn't have drainage, maybe too big of a pot, or when we repot it, you'll actually see a leaf drop. Once you repot, a lot of the times the hibiscus will drop leaves. Everybody's immediate reaction is, hey, it needs water. It's dropping its leaves. It needs water. Often they're too wet. So often we need to allow it to dry out. It'll drop its leaves, adjust to the new pot, adjust to new light levels indoors, and then it will actually put some new foliage on that's out there. We got another little comment here from Tracy. It's wonderful to use your garden as a cutting garden during your flowers indoors. Then you have less to cut back. It's a win-win. I'm going to tell you, there's nothing better than a cutting garden. I have a bunch of limelight hydrangeas in my back, and it was so easy this year because I had some kale, and I had lots of kale. And with that, what I did was I used my kale as the base of my bouquet, and then that was what I used as the base. And then I just put in some lights hydrangeas, and I had the bluey green of the kale with the beautiful limelight hydrangeas, which started to show a little bit of pink. Easy peasy. Backyard, bouquets, in the house, fantastic. I totally and fully agree. We got Marissa this evening. Hi, Marissa. Hi, Frank. I tried to dig out the spaghetti squash plants that last 2 years. I also tried to put newspaper and landscape cloths down, and it still comes back taking over my garden. What else can I do? first thing is as soon as you start to see any growth, and I don't know if it's spaghetti squash, it could be because it may be re-sowing the seed. A spaghetti squash is something that would not overwinter. It's not a perennial root system. So the only thing that would be regrowing is any of the squash that was left over. If the seed was there, it'd be regrowing. It's more than likely a great plant that almost looks like it puts a squash on. If it's a hard woody stem, we got to continually, as soon as we see it sprout into the yard or into the garden, remove. By eliminating that top foliage and making sure they don't have leaves to capture the sunlight, it doesn't give energy back to the root, and eventually it will kill the plant over. Putting landscape fabric down will actually help smother it, make it a little bit less popping its way through. But please, Marissa, if you can send me a picture of what you have growing, that would be really ideal. Frankie at frankieflowers.com. We got Tracy. Do you have a garage attached to your house? I do have a garage attached to my house. I do. And I do have a little bit of a cantina in my house as well. Let me tell you, of course I have a cantina. Fruit cellar, by the way. Paula, Tracy Reynolds, yes. Oh, they're all talking. Everybody's talking. That's the best thing. Hey, if you're joining this community for the first time, if I don't get to answer your questions, if you're a gardener and you see the answer to one of the different questions that are there, please go on there, reply, comment. We're all about sharing here. This is a group of people sharing to help gardens and just have some fun, talk about plants, and kind of maybe motivate you to do more, or maybe even just help you through some of the problems that happen as well. We got Bill Kennedy, my good friend from Utterly Smooth. Bill, good to see you again. Hey, if you got dry hands, Utterly Smooth, family-run company, you know that he is a gardener as well, because Bill is one of the family members based out of the United States. But I'll tell you, loves Canada. Hi, Frankie. Love the new format. We just put in 3 butterfly bushes after they bloom. Should we trim the tops off? Wait till after we get a couple frosts. Enjoy them right now. And yes, indeed, I would be pruning them back because the butterfly bushes will be extended. And we think all those stems, if we got a heavy wet snow or a freezing rain, and they would capture that, that would bend those branches down. They could actually then break into the stem. So we're pruning back that butterfly bush to make it a smaller plant. I would prune it back so it's only about 24 to 36 inches from the ground. We got Sharon this evening as well. Hi, Frankie. Is it okay to trim our Japanese maple in October? You want to do it when they're in dormancy. So it'd be better for you to do it in late November, December. So take a look at it right now. Take a look at the structure of it, what you like, what you don't like. Even go through and take a look at some of the branches you'll want to remove. In your phone, in your calendar, put a date in there where you need to prune the Japanese maple. Better to do it when it's in winter dormancy is the ideal time. But if you have time in October, you can still do it there as well. We got Nadia. Nadia is saying, hi, Frankie, I have a lilac, which is a few years old, hasn't flowered for a couple of years. Why? So if a lilac's not flowering, first off, it needs full sun. If it's not getting 6 hours of direct afternoon sun, if it's in an east space, it's in a north area that's being shaded by trees and or a house, it won't bloom. It needs sun. Secondly, the reason why it won't bloom is that if you are pruning later season, you're removing the blooms, so it won't bloom in spring. It only blooms on the growth that we're getting this year. It puts its flower buds on, so we prune after bloom. Lastly, if it's getting a lot of nitrogen, maybe runoff from some of the fertilizer on the lawn, it's putting all foliage and no flower. But most likely it's probably improper pruning or not enough light. That's the reason why. Sometimes you do get some lilacs that are not really good bloomers and they're dead. So if you have been doing the pruning right and you've been doing, and it has lots of sunlight, then we have to look at the soil. If it's sitting too wet is another reason. But sometimes we maybe want to get a new variety or a better plant there as well. Grace. Hi, Frankie. Is it okay to prune the smoke bush? Thanks. Yeah, you can prune the smoke bush because it's done its puffs of smoke. So a fall pruning on a smoke bush is actually pretty good overall as well. We got Kim Johnson this evening. Hi, Frankie. Can I bring my cantaloupe in to ripen, or can they stay till frost? They can stay outdoors till frost, no problem. You can bring them if they're a nice size and they're almost at a similar size to what you see in your grocery store. You can bring them indoors to ripen as well. I would prefer that they would ripen outdoors until we get, like, if there's a risk of frost, that's when you would want to bring them in. Miriam saying good night. Good night to you as well. I got some time for one more question here. And this is from Tina. Thanks, Frankie, for answering my first question. What about pruning a burning bush? It's grown big this summer. We can prune burning bush in fall. with no fear whatsoever. We got Jerry. And finally, Jerry says, Frankie, I have a hibiscus I planted in the garden, and I heard you talking about potted hibiscus. Do I need to prune it in the fall, or will it be okay in the garden? Really depends on the variety of hibiscus you planted. There are perennial hibiscus, which is the Diablo series. So they're the ones with the big blooms. That's a perennial that can stay in the garden. And then after we get a couple frosts and we start even just before snowfall, you can actually prune that guy back and almost just leave a couple little stubs there to connect snow. If it's Rosa Sharon, another hibiscus can stay outdoors. But if it's the one with a glossy leaf and it's that tropical flower that reminds you of Hawaii or Florida, that guy there will not winter outdoors. It has to come in. So I hope I somewhat helped everybody this evening, maybe stimulated some thought, maybe help you solve some problems. Continue and ask questions. Frankie@frankieflowers.com is my email as well. I'm always here to help. I'm always here to kind of get you motivated to get growing. If we can get more people out there growing and being in the garden, I think we could have happier people. Right now, it seems like the world is so angry. People are but just take some time. Go in the garden, relax. Take your energy out on pulling weeds instead of yelling at people on the roads. And just make sure that you keep blooming, you keep safe, and keep smiling. I'll see you guys next week on Wednesday, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning live on Breakfast Television at 6 a.m.